from Bloomberg's World Headquarters in New York City, I'm Matt Miller.
And from our studios in Washington, D.C., I'm Kailey, Leinz. Welcome to Bloomberg Crypto, a look at the people, transactions, and technology shaping the world of decentralized finance. Coming up, a pivotal day in the trial of Sam Bankman-Fried. Caroline Ellison, the former CEO of Alameda Research, takes the witness stand in her first public appearance since the collapse of FTX.
And we'll talk about the fallout from that collapse and the state of crypto regulation with Sheila Warren, the CEO of the Crypto Council for Innovation.
And as we await live comments from President Joe Biden on the Israel-Hamas war, we'll discuss the role crypto may be playing in financing the conflict. So all of that is ahead. First, though, let's get a snapshot of the market. The best way to see those digital asset prices on your Bloomberg terminal, CRYP Go. And what you will find is it is a relatively quiet day out there in crypto land, and it is a down day for both Bitcoin and Ether, down about 0.5% and 0.7 or so of 1% respectively. Bitcoin right now trading at the $27,400 level and change. Interesting to contrast that with the rally we are seeing in other risk assets. These two buckets of risk assets don't really seem that connected, do they, these days, Matt? The S&P 500 up about 1% as we are seeing this massive bid coming in to the Treasury market. The 10-year yield down 18 basis points on the day, back down at the 462 level. So interesting to watch the bond market. But of course, there's interesting stuff happening in the courts there in New York as well, Matt.
Yeah, absolutely. And I always keep in mind that even though it seems like Bitcoin has been stagnant at $26,000, $27,000, in the last 3 months, we've seen the Bloomberg Dollar Index go from 1,200 to 1,276. So it really is stronger in the face of that dollar appreciation. As we mentioned, Caroline Ellison has taken the stand at the trial of Sam Bankman-Fried. They are currently on a break, but just before then, she testified that he directed her to commit crimes. Bloomberg's Sonali Basak is outside the New York courthouse and joins us live. So, Sonali, what do we know?
We know that Caroline Ellison, who has been a pivotal witness, both for the sake of the prosecution, as well as someone who's come up in the sake of the defense, she has come up and immediately said, yes, we did commit crimes. Sam and I and others. And she said that Sam Bankman-Fried directed her as the CEO of Alameda to commit those crimes. She said, we ultimately took around $14 billion, some of which we were able to pay back. She said that Alameda took several $billion from FTX customers and used it for its own investments and to pay off lenders. Now, remember, we expect some critical evidence to be coming up in the sake of her testimony, particularly from the prosecution. Things like her personal diaries that described her state of mind and relationship to Sam Bankman-Fried, who was her on again, off again boyfriend throughout a period of time, who she met back at her time at Jane Street. And also, we expect that there will be a recording from a November meeting when FTX was facing serious, dire straits. Now, only 10 minutes of testimony had started afternoon. They are on a break, as you're saying. We expect this to go on now for more hours. She follows Gary Wang, who was also an FTX co-founder, who had also pled guilty to a lot of these crimes. So very pivotal testimony coming out of the courthouse today.
Sonali, should we expect that she will testify for as many days as Gary Wang did, considering it was, what, 3 days and change for him?
Well, we don't know how long the testimony, of course, will go on for. I think it's pretty good news that it's happened so early in the trial. This is only the start of the second week of what we expect to be a 6-week trial. There's a third person here who had pled guilty as well and has been cooperating with the prosecution, and that is Nisad Singh, who was in charge of a lot of engineering operations over at FTX. So the three taken together, along with many others, such as Anthony Scaramucci, or even potentially Sam Bankman-Fried's own brother, who had been in charge of his political donations and had led a lot of his foundation work, are also expected to testify over the course of 6 weeks. So, of course, this is among the most pivotal of testimonies that we will see. The tension is palpable. You had her take a while to stand up and identify who Sam Bankman-Fried was in the room. And you also have Sam Bankman-Fried inside the courtroom typing furiously as she speaks. And so certainly a pivotal moment in this trial, and between the relationships of these people who had started out as friends, rode the crypto wave to the top, and then fractured as it fell apart in that November, where billions were lost on behalf of customers and these three people themselves.
What has Sam Bankman-Fried's behavior been like? You point out that he's typing a lot. I believe that's on a laptop that is not connected to the internet. He's gotten, obviously, as we know, a haircut and lost a lot of weight in the MDC. What's he been like in the courthouse?
Yeah, remember, a lot of the early things that had come out about this trial focused on his appearance. This idea here that he was more clean cut. He had chopped off a lot of his hair, where he had been known for kind of this messy, curly hair that was very, pivotal to kind of who he came and presented himself as to the world. He had reportedly, according to the Wall Street Journal, had bought in suits on discount over at Macy's. Caroline Ellison herself came in to the courtroom at about 9:45 a.m. this morning, wearing a blue cap, a t-shirt, sunglasses, and a blazer. So certainly tense, buttoned up. And, he's seeing his friends who he's known, Gary Wong, who testified earlier, he's known him since high school. And so you could imagine that this is a highly personal trial to these people, as well as one of the largest white-collar crime cases in history that he's trying to defend himself against.
All right, Sonali. Thanks very much, Sonali Basak, standing there outside the courthouse in New York, and we'll continue to bring you details as they come across the ticker. Now, Crypto Council for Innovation CEO Sheila Warren joins us now to talk about the effect that this is having on regulation. Obviously, it's been almost a year since the big collapse. What do we know about how this has affected the mood in Washington? Have we recovered yet, Sheila, from the damage done?
Well, those are a bunch of different questions, Matt. And I think I'll start by just saying I don't know that this particular trial, this criminal trial of an individual whose colleagues, whose investors, customers, and others are testifying in some pretty shocking language about crimes committed and being pretty specific about the things that they're saying. I don't know that this particular moment is actually having much of an impact on the regulatory environment. And that's, of course, because we have to look at what's happening in Washington. We have a House that currently does not have a speaker. We have an unprecedented in American history situation where an acting speaker was actually removed from that role and is now potentially running again. So things are quite chaotic in Washington. And I think that this trial is but a moment. It's a criminal trial again. And the reality is that apart from the customer investors who've testified, we're not hearing a ton from the victims here. And that's the testimony, I think, that really is going to have an influence and an impact on what happens in the regulatory space.
Yeah, we're going to talk more about the environment here in Washington in just a few moments, Sheila. But when we think about this trial, and obviously it is one individual that is on trial because of the collapse of one specific entity, but still, doesn't it air potentially not necessarily dirty laundry, but the relitigating of all of these allegations now actually formally in a court raised questions around practices of the crypto industry as a whole? The idea that a lot of this is still not even understood by the jury, which is hearing this. As we learned in jury selection, there was a lot of differences in the familiarity with crypto. I mean, what does this unearth more broadly?
Yeah, I think, again, just as you noted, Kailey, it's an individual here who's on trial. It's an individual's actions and that of a small group of people, many whom have already pled guilty to their crimes. It's not an indictment or practices that are widespread across the industry. And I do think that most people understand that distinction. This is what I call a case of kind of old-timey fraud. This goes back. The legacy here is not so much innovative tech. The legacy here is Bernie Madoff. It's Ken Lay. It's things like this. And I think just as we saw Elizabeth Holmes and the trial that involved Theranos, that wasn't putting diagnostic testing on trial. That was putting Elizabeth Holmes on trial. And to some extent, the small group at Theranos that was part of that particular activity with her, I think the same thing's happening here. So to be frank, I don't know that a lot of people outside of the media, frankly, are painting this as the indictment of the industry that some people would like it to be. And instead, I think most people are focused on the criminal activities that happened here, which, again, really have nothing to do with the technology and are just about the misallocation and misuse of funds, which is a tale as old as fraud. That's been done, unfortunately, for a very long time and multiple times over. That part of it is not particularly innovative.
I hear what you're saying. Although, don't you think the general thought, at least at the time that FTX imploded, was that commingling of funds was something that crypto exchanges were doing. It was sort of standard practice. Do you think, do you disagree with that statement, and do you think it's changed dramatically?
So again, I think this is a particular example of misallocation of funds and misuse of funds and that a kind of appropriation. And the idea, and we're talking about $14 billion, I think Sonali just said, Caroline Ellison testified about, that was misplaced and misused, and it was put in the wrong bucket. So I think that's, again, not the kind of thing that's done in licensed exchanges and licensed regimes. There has been a lot of activity around the world addressing the use of customer funds and what should be the restrictions and the rules around the use of those funds. But again, it's not rocket science to realize, as the CEO of a company, whether we're talking about Caroline Ellison or Sam Bankman-Fried or anybody else who's involved in that small group, that you can't take money that was given to you for investment purposes and use it to, I don't know, pay for FedEx, of Amazon packages, or make political donations with it, or whatever else allegedly Sam and the group did with it. That it doesn't really take a lot of. That just would be an extremely obvious thing, right? That isn't necessarily about the rules that are in place. It's about recognizing your responsibility fundamentally.
All right, very good points there, Sheila. We're going to keep you with us because we want to talk. We do want to talk more about the mood in Washington and how this has affected regulation, especially around crypto specifically. So we're going to talk more with Sheila Warren from the Crypto Council about the state of regulation with Congress, as she mentioned, paralyzed right now because they don't have a Speaker of the House.
Indeed. Plus, we'll talk to Kalshi's co-founder, joining to discuss about the possibility of betting on the outcome of events through contracts.
And to access all the latest data and news on crypto, check out CRYP Go on the terminal. This is Bloomberg.
Congress should pass legislation creating clear guardrails for regulation, including consumer protections, something that I and a lot of folks have been calling for years now. We're way behind in the United States.
This summer, we had two very important bills, one on market structure regulation and one on stablecoins, make its way through committees in the House. These bills aren't yet perfect, but discussions are ongoing and underway, and we're continuing to see progress. And if we can ever get past the drama that we're seeing on the House floor this week, I think these are bills that could make it through the next step before year end.
That was some commentary from our guests on last week's show. Let's continue the conversation about the congressional gridlock Kristen Smith was just referring to there and what it might mean for crypto legislation. For that, we bring back Crypto Council for Innovation CEO Sheila Warren. So, Sheila, that was just hours last Tuesday before House Speaker Kevin McCarthy was booted from that position. Now we have a House of Representatives here in Washington that, frankly, is just not operational at the moment until they have a new speaker. And when we see that kind of turmoil, does that just mean anything related to the crypto legislation that passed out of financial services is just going to be put on the back burner, not dealt with probably this fall?
Well, it means that a lot of things that were top of mind are now being recast. And so nobody really knows what's going to happen. Some will depend on who eventually does become the speaker. Right now, the interim speaker is Patrick McKenry, who, of course, was the co-author of two of the big bills, FIT 21, the Financial Innovation and Technology of the 21st Century Act, and the stablecoin bill. But of course, he's not empowered to take any of those actions. He's only empowered to basically get us a new speaker. And that is not necessarily going so smoothly as I think he and others would wish. So it depends to some extent on who that new person winds up being, what the priorities are. I can say that I do think, to our previous discussion, that this trial does keep these topics top of mind. Whether or not the trial and what emerges from this trial has direct consequence or impact is a secondary question. And I don't know that it will, quite frankly. We're too far along to some extent with some of these bills. But I do think it still remains a topic that's top of mind. And I think that many people in Congress understand that we are losing ground in the United States.
Well, Let's talk about one individual in Congress in particular. Patrick McKenry, who was the chair of financial services, is now serving as Speaker pro tempore. I just wonder, as we're hearing some conversation about how long he might have to stay in that position if the House can't get together as a conference and choose a new speaker, if he ultimately could get the gavel on a more permanent basis, what would be the optimal outcome for the crypto industry, knowing that he has been the leader in financial services of the push toward regulating digital assets? Is he more productive as the chair of financial services or potentially as the Speaker of the House?
Well, at this point, now that the bills have moved out of committee, speaking very narrowly for the crypto industry, I do think having him as Speaker pro tem could actually be quite useful, because he will get to assess and decide to some extent what bills make it to a floor vote. And again, because these bills have passed out of committee, the next step would be a floor vote of the full House. And then, of course, taking across to the Senate and seeing if there was appetite and traction on the other side, in the other chamber, to move these things forward onto the president's desk. So I do think there could be some benefit there. Now, that being said, Patrick McKenry has said, I think repeatedly and publicly, that he's not really interested in that position, and he would like to remain in his actual role. And so we do have candidates who are running, including Kevin McCarthy, who again has put his hand in the air and said he may be willing to rerun for the position. So I think it is just very, very hard to predict and very up in the air right now at this moment.
You know, we brought up the topic of crypto in the Hamas attack on Israel, or in that broader conflict. A lot of times you'll see in the past, obviously 10 years, a little bit of bid for crypto as a flight for safety. We haven't really seen that right now. How do you think it plays a role?
Well, I will say that I think, like it's happened in the past, Israeli police, we know, have frozen cryptocurrency accounts that are linked to Hamas. And those, the bad news for Hamas, is that this is traceable money. And so it is possible to freeze these accounts to stop that flow of funds going to support terrorist activity. And it's not the first time, I think, that governments in general, not just Israel, the United States as well, the Department of Justice, others have worked with different exchanges or different crypto analytics firms to spot where this activity is happening and actually freeze the funds. So that, I think, is the good news on behalf of how crypto can actually be deployed here as a tool for tracking and actually, in some cases, locating where terrorists are engaging in their activity and what they're trying to fund and things like that. And that's what's happening in Israel right now.
Have you seen investigators tracking along the blockchain and finding the source of these things? Because the problem is they're not anonymous, right? But they're pseudonymous. And so even if you find the wallet, you don't necessarily find the owner.
Yeah. And I think what's more critical here is the freezing of the funds. So you're right. It takes a lot of time. And there have been plenty of cases, many of which have been reported on, where the pseudonymity was ultimately compromised. And through deep investigation and through hard work and hard laborious work on the part of law enforcement and others, they were able to uncover who the actual beneficial owners of those wallets were and actually engage in law enforcement type activities, et cetera. But the critical, I think, thing at the moment is that the funds can be frozen and there's no access to them. So that value cannot be deployed for terrorist or any other kind of illicit activity. And that's where I think things stand at the moment. And it'll remain to be seen whether the further work of doxing essentially and figuring out who those wallets are owned by will be critical. But again, these are wallets that are known to be owned by Hamas. So to some extent, the individual is not necessarily as important. It's really the fact that the group does control the wallet, and those wallets, again, can be frozen to deny them access to that value.
All right, Sheila Warren, the CEO of the Crypto Council for Innovation, we always appreciate your time. Thank you very much. And continuing on that subject of Hamas and the attacks against Israel, we just got a headline out. President Biden has just finished a call with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu on the U.S. support for Israel. This, according to the White House. We are, of course, expecting President Biden to deliver remarks from the state dining room at the White House any minute now, and we will bring you those when they begin. So stick with us. This is Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Crypto. I'm Kailey Leinz in Washington with Matt Miller in New York. Well, Kalshi is aiming to form a new asset class, event contracts, where you can buy yes or no positions with respect to whether an event will happen or not. So far, though, the CFTC has disapproved of such contracts, saying that they have determined the contracts involving gaming an activity that is unlawful under state law and are contrary to the public interest. Luana Lopez Lara is Kalshi's co-founder and COO and remains hopeful despite the decision. She joins us now. So, Luana, just talk to us about what exactly Kalshi is trying to do here. And is the CFTC wrong?
First of all, thank you so much for having me. So we are the first federally regulated exchange that allows everyday Americans to trade on the outcome of events. So we actually got regulated in 2020, unanimous and bipartisan support to launch our exchange. And our vision really is to allow the same ways that you can trade commodities and you can trade stocks and you can trade rates, now you can trade directly on the outcome of events. So we started this new asset class event contracts. And currently we offer a lot of different contracts from the outcome, like how high will inflation get, to outcome of Supreme Court cases, to many other things like tax hikes and things of the sort. The only thing that we are currently working with the CFTC on is the election markets. We strongly believe that election markets are necessary for the U.S. I think that it's hard to find risk out there that impacts American people more than elections, and it's an activity that Wall Street and big hedge funds already trade on the outcome of elections, and we just want to open it for everyone. And on that specific point on elections, we disagree with the CFTC's decision.
It is exciting.
Wall Street is already trading.
An exciting product, and also it sounds fascinating and fun, but isn't it spread betting? I mean, isn't this gambling, Luana?
Oh, it's not. I mean, our exchange operates the exact same way the Chicago Mercantile Exchange or the New York Stock Exchange operates. We are just a matching engine, matching parties that want to trade on the outcome of different events. And for example, take our interest rate market, for example, that you can predict or trade or hedge what the interest rates are going to do in the future. They operate very similar to interest rate swaps. The only difference is that we let everyday people that actually have a lot of risk associated to future rates, let's say you want to refinance your home or have student loans tied to the 10-year treasury, you can actually use our markets to hedge that risk, get exposure to that, and protect yourself. So really, in the way, we're just democratizing a lot of activity that's already happening in Wall Street and putting it in a transparent, regulated exchange.
It's very interesting, and I wonder, are you talking with CFTC? Are you talking with the SEC? We're going to have to come back and ask you these questions, Luana, because unfortunately we don't have time. But great to have you on the program. Hope we can get you back. Luana Lopez Lara is the founder of Kalshi and the CTO, Chief Technical Officer as well. Thank you very much for joining us. That does it for Bloomberg Crypto. We will be back next Tuesday at 1 p.m. Wall Street time. We are currently awaiting a statement from President Biden at any point on the Hamas attacks in Israel. This is Bloomberg.